Well, howdy there, folks. Elvis PEMDAS here, talking to you about multiplying and dividing real numbers. Now, here's a question. Which ingredient would be considered king of the garden? That would be Elvis Parsley.
First vocabulary term is a reciprocal. That would be a mathematical expression or function related to another by their product equaling 1. You could also think about it as the quantity obtained by dividing the number 1 by a given quantity. This is also called a multiplicative inverse. So down here, you can see a couple examples of reciprocals. Here, if I wanted to find the reciprocal of 8, all I have to do is take 1 and divide it by our given quantity, 8. So 1 over 8, or 1/8, is going to be the reciprocal of 8. Similarly, if I take 1 and divide it by 1/8, I end up getting 8. That's why these are reciprocals of one another. Same thing here. If I have 2/3 and I want to find the reciprocal of 2/3, I just take 1 and divide it by 2/3, and I end up with 3/2. Similarly, if I have 3/2 and I want to find the reciprocal of 3/2, I take 1, divide it by 3/2, and I end up getting 2/3. That's why these are reciprocals of one another. Now, the easiest way to think about this, the shortcut in finding a reciprocal, is just if you have a fraction, switch the numerator and denominator. So if 2/3 is my fraction, I switch the numerator and denominator and get 3/2. That's the reciprocal of 2/3. If you have a whole number, just write it as a fraction. So 8 is the same as 8 over 1. So if I want to find the reciprocal of 8, I just write it as 8 over 1, switch the numerator and denominator, I get 1/8. That's the reciprocal of 8. The second vocabulary term is a divisor. That's a number by which another number is to be divided. So if we look at our example down here, you see that the divisor is the number that you're dividing into another number. Now, what is that number you're dividing into? That would be called the dividend. That's a number to be divided by another number. So when you're dividing your dividend by your divisor, you will get an answer. And that answer is called your quotient. So again, the number you're dividing into, that's called your dividend. The number you're dividing into that dividend, that's called your divisor. And your answer is called your quotient. Now let's talk about multiplying real numbers. So if you are multiplying two numbers that have the same sign, either they're both positive or they're both negative, your answer, your product, will always be positive. So again, doesn't matter whether you're multiplying two positive numbers together or two negative numbers together. If they're the same sign, your product, your answer, will be positive. Now, if you are multiplying two numbers that have different signs, aka one is negative and one is positive, your answer will always be negative. So again, if you're multiplying a negative number by a positive number or a positive number by a negative number, your product, your answer, will always be negative.
What did Elvis say to the kid who couldn't make up his mind? It's now or never. Example time.
Now, example 1 says find each product, simplify if necessary. So we are multiplying 5 and -3. So we're multiplying two numbers together that have different signs. Anytime you multiply two numbers together that have different signs, your answer will always be negative. So 5 times -3 is going to give you -15. Part B, we're multiplying -4.1 by -8. So we're multiplying two numbers together that have the same sign. Anytime you're multiplying two numbers together that have the same sign, your answer will always be positive. So -4.1 times -8 is going to be positive 32.8. Part C, we're multiplying -1/2 by 8. Now, before we decide what the sign is, we first notice that we're multiplying a fraction by a whole number. So what we need to do first is change 8 into a fraction. So how do we write a whole number as a fraction? We just put it over 1. So now we have -1/2 times 8 over 1. Now, because we're multiplying a negative number times a positive number, our answer will always be negative. So -1/2 times 8 over 1, we multiply the numerators together and denominators together, we end up getting -8 over 2, which simplifies down to -4. Part D, multiplying 4/5 by -7/9. Now we're multiplying two numbers together that have different signs, so our answer is going to be negative. And when we multiply fractions, we multiply the numerators together and denominators together. So 4 times 7 is going to give you 28. 5 times 9 is going to give you 45. And since these two numbers have different signs, our answer is going to be negative.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog. Try it all, you try.
Okay, doing the same thing here. Multiplying -6 times -4. So since these two numbers have the same sign, our answer is going to be positive. So -6 times -4 is going to be positive 24. Part B, we're multiplying 3.2 by -6. So these two numbers have different signs, meaning our product, our answer, is going to be negative. So 3.2 times -6 is going to be -19.2. Part C, we're multiplying -3/4 by -6. Again, we're multiplying a fraction by an integer here. So when that happens, we need to rewrite this integer as a fraction. So we rewrite it as -6 over 1. Now you see that we're multiplying two numbers together that have the same sign. Anytime that happens, your answer, your product, is going to be positive. So negative 3/4 times negative 6/1, we just multiply the numerators together, denominators together, make sure our product is positive, and we get positive 18/4. We can then simplify that further by dividing each of these by 2, and we end up getting positive 9/2. Or, if we want to write that as a mixed number, 4.5. Lastly, part D, we're multiplying positive 9/10 by negative 2/3. So since these two have different signs, our product, our answer, is going to be negative. So when we multiply fractions together, we multiply the numerators together and denominators together and make sure that our product is negative. We then can simplify this fraction a little bit further. If we divide the numerator and denominator by 6, we end up getting negative 3/5. Now example 2 says evaluate each expression for m is equal to negative 4, n is equal to 3, and p is equal to negative 1. So part A, we're going to evaluate negative m times n. So all this problem requires you to do is take what m is equal to, which in this case is negative 4, and plug it in for m. Take what n is equal to, which in this case is 3, and plug that in for n. And then simplify. So negative 4 times 3. How do we evaluate this? Well, we first imagine that this negative out front is just negative 1. So we're first going to multiply negative 1 times negative 4. Now since they have the same sign, your product, your answer, is going to be positive. So negative 1 times negative 4 is going to be positive 4. We then multiply positive 4 times positive 3. Since they both have the same sign, your answer is going to be positive. So positive 4 times positive 3 is going to be positive 12. For B, doing the same thing, we need to evaluate this expression with these given quantities. So we know P here is equal to negative 1. So we're going to take negative 1, plug it in for P. We know M is equal to negative 4. We're going to take negative 4, plug it in for M here. Now we need to simplify this. And it's a little bit different than over here, because over here we had all multiplication. But over here we have multiplication and we have subtraction. So what do we do first? Well, we use the order of operations, PEMDAS. So we start with parentheses. Is there anything to do inside the parentheses? No. Then we go to exponents. Are there any exponents? No. Then we do multiplication or division from left to right. Is there multiplication? Yes, we can multiply the 7 times the negative 1, and since we're multiplying two numbers that have different signs, we know that our answer is going to be negative. So 7 times negative 1 is going to be negative 7. Over here, we're taking negative 2 and multiplying it by negative 4. Just notice that this minus 2 is the same as negative 2 times negative 4. So since we're multiplying two numbers together that have the same sign, we know our product is going to be positive. So negative 2 times negative 4 is going to give us positive 8. So we write negative 7 plus 8. Now we're adding together two numbers that have different signs. So when that happens, remember, you just subtract the absolute value of the two numbers with the big number minus the small number. So in this case, that would be 8 minus 7, and then keep the sign of the bigger number, which in this case would be positive 8. So 8 minus 7 is going to be 1, and since positive 8 is our bigger number, our answer is going to be positive 1.
Ho ho ho! I'm the king. You try.
Okay, doing the same thing here. So we need to evaluate this expression given that m is equal to negative 4, n is equal to 3, and p is equal to negative 1. So we're going to take negative 1, plug it in for p here. We're going to take negative 4, plug it in for m here. And we're going to take 3, plug it in for n here. Now we need to simplify this. So how do we simplify an expression like this? Well, we use the order of operations to tell us what to do first. Remember, PEMDAS. P stands for parentheses. So we do what's inside the parentheses first. Here that would be negative 4 plus 3. Since we're adding together two numbers that have different signs, we just subtract the absolute value of the two numbers. So in this case, that would be 4 minus 3. And we take the sign of the bigger number. In this case, that would be negative 4. So negative 4 plus 3 is going to give you negative 1. Now all we have to do is just multiply these two numbers together. And since these two numbers have the same sign, we know our answer is going to be positive. Our product is going to be positive. So negative 1 times negative 1 is going to give you positive 1. Over here, evaluating this expression, we need to take negative 4, plug it in for m here. We need to take negative 1, plug it in for p here. Now we need to simplify this expression using the order of operations, PEMDAS. So we start with p, parentheses. Is there anything to do inside these two parentheses? No. So we move on to exponents. Are there any exponents here? Yes, we have negative 4 to the third power. So negative 4 to the third power is going to be negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. So negative 4 times negative 4, they have the same sign, so your product's going to be positive, so it would be positive 16. But then you take that positive 16 and multiply it by negative 4 again. And since the two numbers we're multiplying together have different signs, your product is going to be negative. Therefore, positive 16 times negative 4 is going to give you negative 64. Now that we've done exponents, we move on to multiplication or division from left to right. So we start on the left. Here, 2 times negative 64. We're multiplying two numbers together that have different signs. Therefore, our product is going to be negative. So 2 times negative 64 is going to give you negative 128. Now we have negative 128 minus negative 1. And we said anytime you have subtraction, just change it to adding the opposite. So this is the same as negative 128 plus positive 1. Now, how do we add these two together? Well, when you're adding two numbers together that have different signs, you just subtract subtract the absolute value of the two numbers, big minus the small. So in this case, that'll be positive 128 minus positive 1, which gives you 127. And you keep the sign of the bigger number, which in this case would be that negative 128. So our answer should be negative 127. Now let's talk about dividing real numbers. So when you are dividing two numbers that have the same sign, your answer, your quotient, will always be positive. So anytime you're dividing two numbers that have the same sign, whether they're both positive or both negative, your quotient, your answer, is going to be positive. Now, if you are dividing two numbers that have different signs, your answer, your quotient, will always be negative. So if you are dividing a positive number by a negative number or a negative number by a positive number, your quotient, your answer, will always be negative. Now, the cool thing is that these two properties are the exact same ones we went over for multiplying two numbers. So whether you're multiplying or dividing two numbers, if they have the same sign, your answer will be positive. If they have different signs, your answer will be negative. Please note that if you are dividing by 0, anytime you divide by 0, your answer will be undefined, or you could write no solution. Either way. Now let's talk about dividing by a fraction. So when dividing a number by a fraction, simply change the problem to multiplication and take the reciprocal of your divisor. So what does this mean? Well, let's take a look at an example to show you how this works. If we're dividing 1/3 by 3/5, what you want to do is you want to change the division sign to multiplication and then take the reciprocal of your divisor, which would be that second number here. So we're going to leave the first number alone. It's going to stay 1/3. Then we're going to change that division sign to multiplication, and then the second fraction, our divisor, we're going to take the reciprocal of. So 1/3 divided by 3/5 is the same as 1/3 times 5/3. You then multiply the numerators together and denominators together, and you get your answer. So again, dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. Now example 3 says find each quotient, simplify if necessary. So we have 6 divided by -3. And we said anytime you're dividing two numbers that have different signs, your quotient, your answer, is going to be negative. So 6 divided by -3 is going to equal -2. Part B, we have -8.4 divided by 0. Now we said earlier that anytime you're dividing by 0, your answer should be undefined or no solution. Part C, we have the quantity 15 minus 20 all over -5. And we've said in previous lessons that you need to simplify your numerator, then simplify your denominator, then you can divide. So let's simplify our numerator first. We have 15 minus 20. Now, anytime we're subtracting, we want to change it to adding the opposite. So 15 minus 20 is the same as 15 plus -20. Now you see that we're adding together two numbers that have different signs. In order to do that, you need to subtract the absolute value of the two numbers with the big number minus small number. So absolute value of 15 is 15, absolute value of -20 is 20. So we take 20, subtract 15, you get 5. And we need to keep the sign of the bigger number, which in this case would be -20. So 15 plus -20 is going to equal -5. Now all you have to do is just divide -5 by -5. And anytime you divide two numbers that have the same sign, your answer is going to be positive. Since we have -5 divided by -5, our answer is going to be positive 1. Part D, we have 4/5 divided by -1/3. So we are dividing two numbers that have different signs. Anytime that happens, your answer is going to be negative. But here, we're dividing by a fraction. Remember, anytime you divide by a fraction, you need to rewrite it so it's multiplying by the reciprocal. So our 4/5, our first number, stays the same. It's still going to be 4/5. Our division sign is going to change to multiplication, and we're going to take the reciprocal of this fraction, our divisor here, which is going to be -3/1. Now all we have to do is just multiply the numerators together and denominators together. 4 times 3 is going to give you 12. 5 times 1 is going to give you 5. And again, since we're multiplying now two numbers that have different signs, our answer is going to be negative still. And you get -12/5. Or if you want to write that as a mixed number, -2 2/5.
What did Elvis say to the bully? Don't be cruel. Do harm is true. You try.
Okay, doing the same thing. So part A, we have -2 divided by 4. Anytime you're dividing two numbers that have different signs, your quotient, your answer, is going to be negative. So -2 divided by -4 is going to be -1/2. Part B, -8.4 divided by -2.1. Again, we're dividing two numbers, but this time they have the same sign. So anytime you're dividing two numbers that have the same sign, your answer is always going to be positive. So -8.4 divided by -2.1 is going to give you +4. Part C, we have the quantity 3 minus 14 all over 2. So again, anytime you have something like this, you need to simplify the numerator, then simplify the denominator, then divide those two numbers. So let's simplify the numerator first. 3 minus 14. Instead of having subtraction, we're going to rewrite that as adding the opposite. So 3 minus 14 is the same as 3 plus negative 14. Now in order to add 3 and negative 14, because they have different signs, you need to subtract the absolute value of the two numbers, the big number minus the small number, and then keep the sign of the bigger number. So in this case, the absolute value of 3 is 3, absolute value of negative 14 is 14. So we're going to take 14, subtract 3, we get 11. And we're going to keep the sign of the bigger number, which in this case would be negative 14. So 3 plus negative 14 is going to be equal to negative 11. And now our denominator stays 2, so our answer, our quotient, is going to be negative 11 over 2. Or if we wanted to write that as a mixed number, negative 5.5. Now part D, we have negative 5/8 divided by negative 2. So anytime you're dividing two numbers that have the same sign, you know your quotient, your answer is going to be positive. But how am I supposed to divide negative 5/8 and negative 2? Well, it would be helpful if you rewrote negative 2 as a fraction also. So negative 2 is the same as negative 2 over 1. Now you see you're dividing by a fraction. So in order to divide by a fraction, you need to change that to multiplying by its reciprocal. So our first number is going to stay the same. It's still going to be negative 5/8. The division sign we're going to change to multiplication, and then we're going to take the reciprocal of negative 2 over 1, which becomes negative 1/2. Now all we have to do is just multiply the numerators together and denominators together, so we end up getting 5 over 16. And since we're multiplying two numbers together that have the same sign, our product, our answer, is going to be positive. Now example 4 says find the value of the expression x over y for the given values of x and y. Write your answer in simplest form. So they have given us what x and y are equal to, so we just have to take those numbers and plug them into the expression x over y. So we're going to take negative 2/3, plug it in for x up here, take negative 1/4, plug it in for y down here. Now you see we've created something called a complex fraction where our numerator and denominator are also fractions. Well, how do I simplify this? Well, it's actually pretty easy. Just recognize that this is the same as negative 2/3 divided by negative 1/4, which we can rewrite like this. Now we know how to divide by a fraction, right? Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So this first number, negative 2/3, stays the same. This division sign is going to change to multiplication, and this negative 1/4 we're going to take the reciprocal of, and it becomes negative 4 over 1. Now all we have to do is just multiply the numerators together and denominators together. 2 times 4 is going to give you 8. 3 times 1 is going to give you 3. And since we're multiplying two numbers together that have the same sign, our answer is going to be positive.
Don't you step on my blue suede shoes. They're my blue suede shoes. Don't you ever step on them shoes. My blue suede shoes. You try.
Okay, doing the same thing. We still want to evaluate this expression, x over y, and they give us what x and y are equal to. So we're going to take 2/7, plug that in for x up here, take negative 20 over 21, plug that in for y down here. Now we've created something called a complex fraction, where our numerator and denominator are fractions. All you have to do to simplify this is recognize that this is the same as 2/7 divided by negative 20 over 21, which we can rewrite like this. Now we just have a division problem, and we're dividing by a fraction. And we know when you divide by a fraction, we just change that to multiplying by its reciprocal. So the 2/7 is going to stay the same. This division sign we're going to change to multiplication, and negative 20 over 21 we're going to take the reciprocal of, and it becomes negative 21 over 20. Now all we have to do is just multiply the numerators together and denominators together, and recognize that because we're multiplying two numbers that have different signs, our product, our answer, is going to be negative. Now before you box this up and call it a day, you can still simplify this fraction. We can actually divide the numerator and denominator both by 14, and when we do, we end up getting negative 3 over 10. Now example 5 says evaluate each expression for x is equal to negative 2, y is equal to 3, and z is equal to 3.5. So this is exactly what we were doing before, only this time our expressions have some division in them. So we're going to take 3, plug that in for y here and here. We're going to take negative 2, plug that in for x here, and now we're going to simplify this expression. So how do we do that? We use the order of operations, PEMDAS. So we start with the parentheses. Is there anything we can do inside the parentheses? Well, yeah, inside the parentheses we have addition and we have multiplication. So inside the parentheses we also use PEMDAS, the order of operations. So we're going to do the multiplication first before we do any addition. So we actually take 3 and multiply it by negative 2, and anytime you multiply two numbers that have different signs, your answer is going to be negative. So 3 times negative 2 is going to be negative 6. Next, we need to again simplify inside these parentheses. So we need to do this addition right here. So we're going to add 3 and negative 6. Anytime you add two numbers that have different signs, you need to subtract the absolute value of the two numbers with the big number minus the small number. So in this case, it'll be 6 minus 3, and we're going to keep the sign of the bigger number. In this case, that would be -6. So 3 plus -6 is going to equal -3. Lastly, we need to divide -3 by 3. Now, when you divide two numbers that have different signs, your answer, your quotient, is going to be negative. So -3 divided by +3 is going to be -1. Part B, doing the same thing. So we need to plug in what each of these variables are equal to. We know x is equal to -2, that's going to go in here and here. We know z is equal to 3.5, that's going to go in here. Now what we have to do is simplify according to the order of operations, PEMDAS. So we start with what's inside the parentheses. Is there anything we can simplify inside the parentheses? No. So we move on to exponents. Are there any exponents? Yes, we have -2 to the third power. So -2 to the third power is -2 times -2, which again, two numbers multiplied together that have the same sign. Your answer is going to be positive. So -2 times -2 is +4. Then we take +4 and multiply that by -2, and we have two numbers that have different signs, so your answer is going to be negative. So +4 times -2 is going to be -8. So that's how we simplify -2 to the third power. Next, we need to move on to multiplication or division from left to right. So we're going to start over here on our left. We have 4 times -8. Multiplying two numbers together that have different signs, we're going to get a negative number. So 4 times -8 is going to give you -32. We then move to the right side of our expression where we have a fraction that has something in the numerator that needs to be simplified. So we simplify that first, then we can divide. Multiplying two numbers together that have the same sign, we're going to get a positive answer. So 2 times 3.5 is going to give you 7. We now can divide 7 and -2. So how do we divide these two numbers? Well, since this number is positive and this number is negative, they have different signs. So our quotient, our answer, is going to be negative. So 7 divided by -2 is going to be -3.5. Now we're subtracting two numbers. So anytime you're subtracting two numbers, we want to change it to adding the opposite. So -32 minus -3.5 is the same as -32 plus +3.5. Now, since we're adding two numbers that have different signs, again, we just subtract the absolute value of the two numbers with the big minus the small and keep the sign of the bigger number. So absolute value of -32 is +32, absolute value of 3.5 is 3.5. 32 minus 3.5 is going to give you 28.5, and since our bigger number is negative, our answer should be negative as well.
Here we go, Elvis, here we go. You try.
Okay, doing the same thing. We need to evaluate each of these expressions, and we need to plug in what each of these variables are equal to. So we know z is equal to 3.5. We're going to take 3.5, plug it in for z here. We know x is equal to -2. That's going to go in here. Now what we have to do is simplify according to the order of operations, PEMDAS. So we start with parentheses. Is there anything to do inside the parentheses? No. Then we go to exponents. Are there any exponents? No. Then we do multiplication or division. Is there any multiplication or division? Yes. So we multiply or divide from left to right. So we start on the left side. 4 times 3.5. Since these two numbers have the same sign, our product, our answer, is going to be positive. So 4 times 3.5 is going to give you +14. We then have 14 divided by -2. Since we're dividing two numbers that have different signs, our quotient, our answer, is going to be negative. So 14 divided by -2 is going to give you -7. Part B, doing the same thing. We need to plug in what each of these variables are equal to. Since we know y is equal to 3, we're going to plug in 3 here. Since we know x is equal to -2, we're going to take -2, plug it in here. Then we simplify according to the order of operations, PEMDAS. So we start with P. Is there anything to do inside the parentheses? No. Yes. -2 divided by 4. We're dividing two numbers that have different signs. Since they have different signs, our quotient, our answer, is going to be negative. So -2 divided by +4 is going to give you -1/2. Next, we move on to exponents. Are there any exponents? Yes, we have 3 to the second power, so that's 3 times 3. Since those two numbers have the same sign, we know our product, our answer, is going to be positive. So 3 times 3 is going to give you 9. We then move on to multiplication or division from left to right. Is there any multiplication or division? Yes, we have multiplication. -2 times +9. Since these two numbers have different signs, our product, our answer, is going to be negative. So -2 times +9 is going to give you -18. Now we have to add together -18 and -1/2. That seems super complicated. Well, if we write it as a mixed number, it's actually not that complicated. -18 plus -1/2, since they have the same sign, we just add together the absolute value of the two numbers and keep the same sign. So 18 plus 1/2 is just 18.5. And since both of these numbers are negative, we keep the same sign. So our answer is going to be -18.5. Now, word problem says, as riders go down the first 235-foot drop of Goliath at Six Flags, you can approximate the height h in feet of the roller coaster car using the formula h is equal to 235 minus 16t squared, where t is the number of seconds since the start of the descent. How far is the roller coaster from the bottom of the hill after 1 second and after 2 seconds? So, first step in a word problem. We're not scared. We can do this. Step 2. What is the question asking us to find? It's asking us how far is the roller coaster from the bottom of the hill after a certain amount of seconds. Well, isn't there a formula they give us to tell us how far the roller coaster is from the bottom of the hill, aka the height of the roller coaster? Yeah, h is equal to 235 minus 16t squared. So all we have to do is use this formula to figure out how far the roller coaster is from the bottom of the hill, aka the height of the roller coaster, after 1 second and after 2 seconds. So let's plug in 1 second and 2 seconds to this formula right here for t and get the height of our roller coaster. So let's start with 1. If I were to plug in 1 for t in this formula and simplify according to the order of operations, PEMDAS, first thing I would do is simplify inside the parentheses. Nothing to do in here. Next, I would do the exponents. Is there any exponents? Yes, we have 1 squared. So 1 squared is just 1 times 1, which gives you 1. Next, we want to multiply or divide from left to right. So no multiplication over here, but we do have multiplication over here. We have negative 16 times 1. So negative 16 times 1, we're multiplying two numbers together that have different signs. So our answer should be negative. So negative 16 times positive 1 is going to give you negative 16. Lastly, we add or subtract, and here there is subtraction. So 235 minus 16, we know how to subtract those two positive numbers. We end up getting h is equal to 219 feet, aka the roller coaster is 219 feet from the bottom of the hill after 1 second. Next, let's do 2 seconds. We plug in 2 for t and simplify. So again, order of operations, PEMDAS. We start with parentheses. Is there anything to do inside the parentheses? No. So we move to exponents. Are there any exponents? Yes. We have 2 squared. So positive 2 times positive 2 is going to give you positive 4. Next, we multiply or divide from left to right. No multiplication or division over here, but there is multiplication over here. We have negative 16 times positive 4. So anytime you multiply two numbers together that have different signs, your answer should be negative. So negative 16 times positive 4 is going to be negative 64. We then add or subtract, and there is subtraction here. So 235 minus 64, we know how to subtract two positive numbers. We end up getting h, or the height of the roller coaster, after 2 seconds is going to be 171 feet.